Question 1. Market research demonstrates that drivers in Brighton and Hove often encounter situations where pedestrians are near the curb, appearing hesitant to cross a road. Considering the principles of risk assessment and safe driving practices as outlined in the UK Highway Code, which of the following actions best demonstrates a professional and responsible approach when approaching such a pedestrian? Option A. Sound the horn to alert the pedestrian to your presence. Option B. Reduce speed significantly, prepare to stop, and attempt to make eye contact with the pedestrian to ascertain their intentions. Option C. Maintain current speed and assume the pedestrian will not cross the road. Option D. Proceed at a reduced speed but without making eye contact or signaling intent to stop. Correct answer is B. Reduce speed significantly, prepare to stop, and attempt to make eye contact with the pedestrian to ascertain their intentions. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a driver to balance the immediate need to proceed with the overarching responsibility to ensure road safety, particularly when faced with ambiguous conditions. The presence of a pedestrian, even if seemingly hesitant, introduces a significant element of risk that must be proactively managed. Careful judgment is required to avoid potential collisions and to uphold the legal and ethical obligations of a driver. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a proactive and cautious approach. This means reducing speed significantly, preparing to stop if necessary, and making eye contact with the pedestrian to confirm their intentions. This approach aligns with the Highway Code's emphasis on anticipating the actions of other road users, especially vulnerable ones like pedestrians, and the fundamental principle of driving defensively to prevent accidents. It prioritizes safety and compliance with the law by assuming the pedestrian might enter the roadway. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to maintain speed and assume the pedestrian will not cross. This fails to acknowledge the inherent unpredictability of pedestrian behavior and directly contravenes the Highway Code's guidance on observing and anticipating. It creates a high risk of a collision and demonstrates a disregard for the safety of others. Another incorrect approach is to honk the horn aggressively. While intended to alert the pedestrian, this can startle them, potentially causing them to react unpredictably and even step into the path of the vehicle. It is an aggressive action that escalates the situation rather than de-escalating it safely, and is not in line with the principles of courteous and safe driving. A further incorrect approach is to proceed at a reduced speed, but without attempting to make eye contact or clearly signaling intent to stop. While better than maintaining speed, this still leaves room for misinterpretation by the pedestrian. Without clear communication, the pedestrian might still assume it is safe to cross, leading to a dangerous situation. It lacks the proactive communication necessary for effective risk management. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes safety and legal compliance. This involves a continuous cycle of observation, anticipation, and communication. When encountering a potential hazard like a hesitant pedestrian, the professional driver should first observe their behavior, then anticipate the worst-case scenario, the pedestrian stepping out, and finally communicate their intentions clearly through reduced speed, braking, and visual cues like eye contact. This systematic approach ensures that risks are mitigated effectively and that the driver acts responsibly and ethically. Question 2. The evaluation methodology shows that when approaching a junction with limited visibility in Brighton and Hove, what is the most effective risk assessment strategy for a driver? Option A. Focus exclusively on the immediate path of travel, assuming that any emerging hazards will be visible in time to react. Option B. Slow down significantly, scan thoroughly for all potential hazards including other road users and environmental factors, and be prepared to stop if necessary before proceeding with caution. Option C. Maintain a steady speed, relying on the assumption that other road users will adhere to their expected behavior. Option D. Accelerate slightly to gain momentum and clear the junction quickly before any potential hazards emerge. The correct answer is B. Slow down significantly, scan thoroughly for all potential hazards including other road users and environmental factors, and be prepared to stop if necessary before proceeding with caution. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows that assessing the risk of a driver's behavior is a core component of ensuring road safety in Brighton and Hove. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a driver to move beyond simply following rules to proactively identifying and mitigating potential hazards in a dynamic environment. The judgment required is not about rote memorization, but about applying learned principles to real-world, unpredictable situations. The best approach involves a comprehensive assessment of the immediate driving environment, considering factors such as road conditions, other road users, and potential hazards. This includes anticipating the actions of others and planning defensive driving maneuvers. This is correct because it aligns with the principles of proactive risk management, which is fundamental to safe driving. Specifically, the Highway Code, which underpins the Brighton and Hove driving test, emphasizes anticipating hazards and planning for them, thereby reducing the likelihood of accidents. This approach demonstrates a driver's ability to not only react to situations, but to foresee and prevent them, which is the ultimate goal of a driving assessment. An incorrect approach would be to focus solely on maintaining the vehicle's position within the lane and adhering strictly to speed limits without considering the broader context. This fails to address the dynamic nature of road use and the potential for unexpected events. It neglects the crucial element of anticipation, a key tenet of safe driving, and could lead to a driver being unprepared for sudden changes in traffic or road conditions, thereby increasing risk. Another incorrect approach would be to prioritize speed and efficiency over safety, for instance, by attempting to overtake a slow-moving vehicle on a blind bend. This demonstrates a severe disregard for safety regulations and the potential consequences of such actions. It directly contravenes the Highway Code's guidance on safe overtaking and hazard perception, showing a lack of judgment and an unacceptable level of risk-taking. A further incorrect approach would be to become overly fixated on the immediate actions of the vehicle directly in front, ignoring other traffic or potential hazards further ahead or to the sides. This narrow focus limits a driver's awareness and ability to react to developing situations, such as a pedestrian stepping out or a vehicle merging unexpectedly. It represents a failure to conduct a proper all-around observation, which is a critical component of safe driving and a key assessment criterion. Professionals should use a decision-making framework that prioritizes hazard perception and risk mitigation. This involves a continuous cycle of observation, anticipation, and planning. Drivers should constantly scan their environment, identify potential hazards, assess the risk they pose, and then take appropriate action to avoid them. This proactive mindset, grounded in the principles of the Highway Code, is essential for safe and responsible driving. Question 3. Stakeholder feedback indicates a need to reinforce the importance of proactive risk management during driving assessments in Brighton and Hove. Imagine you are a driving examiner observing a candidate who is following a vehicle exhibiting extremely erratic and dangerous driving behavior, including swerving significantly and braking abruptly without apparent reason. What is the most appropriate immediate action to take to ensure public safety and uphold the integrity of the driving assessment? Option A. Continue driving and observe the dangerous vehicle without taking any immediate action, assuming the other driver will correct their behavior. Option B. Continue driving while attempting to signal or gesture to the dangerous driver to cease their behavior. Option C. Safely stop the vehicle, activate hazard lights, and report the dangerous vehicle to the appropriate authorities. Option D. Accelerate to overtake the dangerous vehicle to create distance and avoid potential conflict. Correct answer is C. Safely stop the vehicle, activate hazard lights, and report the dangerous vehicle to the appropriate authorities. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a driver to balance immediate safety concerns with the potential for causing disruption and inconvenience to other road users. The driver must make a rapid, on-the-spot judgment that prioritizes public safety while also considering the broader impact of their actions. The specific context of Brighton and Hove, with its potentially busy urban and coastal roads, adds complexity due to varying traffic conditions and pedestrian activity. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves immediately stopping the vehicle in a safe location, activating hazard lights, and contacting the appropriate authorities, e.g., emergency services or the DVSA if it's a driving test scenario, to report the observed dangerous driving. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the immediate risk to public safety, which is the paramount concern under UK road traffic law and driving test regulations. The Highway Code, which underpins driving standards in the UK, emphasizes the driver's responsibility to drive safely and avoid danger to themselves or others. By stopping and reporting, the driver is fulfilling their legal and ethical obligation to prevent potential harm. Incorrect approach is analysis. Failing to stop and instead continuing to drive while observing the dangerous vehicle is professionally unacceptable. This approach neglects the immediate duty to act when a clear danger is present, potentially allowing a hazardous situation to escalate and cause an accident. It violates the fundamental principle of safe driving and the responsibility to prevent harm. Attempting to signal or gesture to the dangerous driver to stop or change their behavior is also professionally unacceptable. While well-intentioned, this approach is risky and can escalate the situation, potentially leading to confrontation or further erratic driving from the other vehicle. It places the driver in a position of direct engagement with a dangerous situation without the authority or training to manage it safely, and it delays the crucial step of reporting the hazard to those who can effectively intervene. Ignoring the dangerous driving and continuing the journey without taking any action is the most professionally unacceptable approach. This demonstrates a complete disregard for public safety and a failure to uphold the responsibilities of a road user. It is a direct contravention of the principles of safe driving and could have severe legal and ethical consequences if an incident were to occur as a result of this inaction. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes safety above all else. This involves 1. Immediate hazard identification and assessment. 2. Prioritizing actions that mitigate immediate risk to life and limb. 3. Following established protocols for reporting dangerous situations to the relevant authorities. 4. Avoiding personal intervention in potentially volatile situations. 5. Understanding that inaction in the face of a clear danger is a failure of professional responsibility. Question 4. The assessment process reveals a candidate for their Brighton and Hove driving test exhibiting noticeable signs of nervousness, including trembling hands and a hesitant approach to performing the initial vehicle safety checks. Considering the paramount importance of public safety and the need for a fair evaluation, which of the following represents the most appropriate course of action for the examiner? Option A. Immediately fail the candidate due to their visible anxiety, as this indicates they are not in a suitable state to drive safely on public roads. Option B. Offer significant reassurance and guidance throughout the test to help the candidate manage their nerves, potentially overlooking minor driving errors that may be attributed to their anxiety. Option C. Proceed with the standard driving test, meticulously observing the candidate's actual driving performance and vehicle control against the DVSA established standards, and base the pass/fail decision solely on whether the candidate demonstrates safe driving competence throughout the assessment. Option D. Pass the candidate regardless of their driving performance, acknowledging their effort in attending the test despite their evident nervousness. The correct answer is C. Proceed with the standard driving test, meticulously observing the candidate's actual driving performance and vehicle control against the DVSA established standards, and base the pass/fail decision solely on whether the candidate demonstrates safe driving competence throughout the assessment. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a candidate exhibiting signs of significant anxiety, including trembling hands and a hesitant approach to basic vehicle checks. This scenario is professionally challenging because the examiner must balance the paramount duty of ensuring public safety with the need to conduct a fair and objective assessment of the candidate's driving ability. Overly lenient assessment could put other road users at risk, while an overly harsh or unsympathetic approach could unfairly penalize a candidate who might otherwise be competent but is experiencing temporary stress. The examiner's judgment requires careful consideration of observable driving performance against the backdrop of the candidate's emotional state. The best approach involves a balanced assessment that prioritizes safety while acknowledging the candidate's anxiety. This means meticulously observing the candidate's actual execution of driving tasks, including vehicle checks, observation, control, and road positioning. Against the DVSA, Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency, published standards for the Brighton and Hove area. If the candidate's driving performance, despite their anxiety, meets the required standard for safe driving and demonstrates competence in all assessed areas, they should pass. The examiner should note the anxiety but base the pass/fail decision solely on the objective demonstration of safe driving skills as per the Highway Code and DVSA guidelines. This aligns with the ethical obligation to assess competence fairly and the regulatory requirement to ensure only safe drivers are licensed. An approach that immediately fails the candidate based solely on visible signs of anxiety, without a thorough assessment of their actual driving performance, is professionally unacceptable. It fails to adhere to the DVSA assessment criteria, which focus on the candidate's ability to drive safely, not their emotional state in isolation. It is an unfair and subjective judgment that does not reflect the candidate's potential to drive safely once they have overcome their nerves. Another unacceptable approach would be to overlook significant driving faults due to sympathy for the candidate's anxiety. While empathy is important, the examiner's primary responsibility is to public safety. Allowing a candidate to pass who demonstrates dangerous or serious driving faults, even if attributed to nerves, would be a dereliction of duty and a violation of the DVSA mandate to license competent drivers. This approach prioritizes the candidate's immediate feelings over the safety of the public. Finally, an approach that involves excessive coaching or reassurance during the test, beyond what is permitted by DVSA guidelines, is also inappropriate. While a brief moment of encouragement might be permissible in some contexts, extensive intervention alters the nature of the test, making it no longer a true assessment of the candidate's independent driving ability. This undermines the integrity of the testing process and is not in line with the objective assessment required. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that involves 1. Objective observation of performance against established standards. 2. Consideration of contributing factors, like anxiety, but not allowing them to be the sole determinant of the outcome. 3. Prioritizing public safety as the ultimate ethical and regulatory imperative. 4. Maintaining impartiality and fairness throughout the assessment. Question 5. Analysis of a situation encountered during a driving test in Brighton and Hove. A driver is running late for a critical appointment and encounters a section of road with reduced visibility due to heavy rain and spray from other vehicles. The driver considers accelerating to make up time before the visibility deteriorates further. Which of the following approaches best reflects a responsible and legally compliant risk assessment? Option A. Maintain current speed and rely on the assumption that other drivers will be equally cautious. Option B. Immediately reduce speed to a safe level commensurate with the reduced visibility, activate hazard lights if necessary, and proceed with extreme caution, prioritizing safety over punctuality. Option C. Make a sudden lane change to an apparently clearer lane without fully checking blind spots to gain a speed advantage. Option D. Accelerate to pass through the section of reduced visibility quickly, assuming the driver's skill can compensate for the poor conditions. The correct answer is B. Immediately reduce speed to a safe level commensurate with the reduced visibility, activate hazard lights if necessary, and proceed with extreme caution, prioritizing safety over punctuality. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a driver to balance the immediate need to reach a destination with the paramount duty of ensuring public safety. The pressure of time, especially when dealing with a potentially urgent situation, can lead to compromised judgment. A driver must critically assess the risks associated with their actions, understanding that even minor deviations from safe driving practices can have severe consequences. The specific context of Brighton and Hove, with its unique road network and potential for varied traffic conditions, adds another layer of complexity. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves a thorough, albeit rapid, risk assessment that prioritizes safety above all else. This means evaluating the immediate road conditions, traffic density, visibility, and the potential impact of any maneuver on other road users. If the assessment reveals that proceeding would create an unacceptable risk, the driver must choose an alternative that mitigates this risk, even if it means a delay. This aligns with the fundamental principles of safe driving enshrined in UK road traffic law and the Highway Code, which mandate that all drivers must drive with due care and attention, and avoid causing danger to others. The ethical imperative is to protect life and limb, which supersedes personal urgency. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves proceeding with the journey despite a clear indication of hazardous conditions, such as heavy fog or icy roads, simply because the driver feels they can manage the risk. This fails to acknowledge the inherent unpredictability of such conditions and the potential for sudden loss of control, directly contravening the duty to drive with due care and attention. It also disregards the principle of avoiding danger to others. Another incorrect approach is to make a sudden, unexpected maneuver, like an abrupt lane change or a sharp turn, to gain a perceived advantage without adequately checking mirrors or signaling. This is a direct violation of rules concerning signaling and lane discipline, increasing the likelihood of a collision and demonstrating a failure to consider the safety of other road users. A third incorrect approach is to ignore the presence of vulnerable road users, such as cyclists or pedestrians, and assume they will take evasive action. This demonstrates a lack of situational awareness and a disregard for the safety of those most at risk, which is a serious ethical and legal failing. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a comprehensive situational awareness. This involves actively observing and interpreting the environment. Next, they must identify potential hazards and assess the associated risks, considering the severity of potential outcomes and the likelihood of occurrence. Based on this assessment, they should determine the safest course of action, which may involve proceeding cautiously, altering their route, or stopping if necessary. This process should be guided by a strong ethical compass that prioritizes the well-being of others and adherence to legal requirements. Question 6. The review process indicates that a learner driver in Brighton and Hove consistently hesitates when approaching junctions, often misjudging gaps in traffic, despite having completed the required syllabus hours for their driving test. What is the most responsible course of action for the driving instructor? Option A. Document the hesitation, identify its root cause, e.g., confidence in judging gaps, and provide targeted training to address this specific issue before recommending the learner for their driving test. Option B. Dismiss the hesitation as a minor issue that the learner will likely overcome independently once they are a qualified driver. Option C. Allow the learner to proceed to their driving test as they have met the syllabus hour requirement, assuming they will gain confidence during the test. Option D. Prioritize the learner's expressed desire to take the test and recommend them, despite the observed hesitation at junctions. The correct answer is A. Document the hesitation, identify its root cause, e.g., confidence in judging gaps, and provide targeted training to address this specific issue before recommending the learner for their driving test. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Brighton and Hove driver instructor because it requires them to balance the immediate need to ensure road safety with the learner driver's desire to progress and the potential impact on their confidence. The instructor must make a judgment call that prioritizes safety and adherence to the highway code, even if it means delaying a learner's perceived readiness for the test. This requires a nuanced understanding of risk assessment beyond simply identifying hazards. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves the instructor meticulously documenting the learner's performance, specifically noting the recurring instances of hesitation at junctions and the underlying reasons for this hesitation. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the core of the risk assessment, understanding the root cause of the unsafe behavior. By identifying that the hesitation stems from a lack of confidence in judging gaps, the instructor can then implement targeted training. This aligns with the DVSA, Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency, emphasis on developing safe driving habits and the ability to make sound judgments, which are fundamental to passing the Brighton and Hove driving test and driving safely on public roads. The instructor's duty of care is paramount, and this approach ensures that the learner is not put forward for assessment until they can demonstrate consistent safe decision-making. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach involves allowing the learner to proceed to the test if they have covered the required syllabus hours, despite the observed hesitation. This is professionally unacceptable because it prioritizes the completion of a syllabus over genuine competency and safety. The Highway Code and DVSA guidelines mandate that a driver must be able to navigate all road conditions safely and confidently. Simply ticking off syllabus points does not guarantee this. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss the hesitation as a minor issue that the learner will overcome during the test itself. This is a failure in risk assessment and professional judgment. The instructor's role is to identify and rectify potential safety deficiencies before the test. Allowing a learner with a known issue to proceed risks not only their failure but, more importantly, the safety of themselves and other road users. It demonstrates a lack of diligence and a disregard for the responsibility entrusted to the instructor. A further incorrect approach is to focus solely on the learner's expressed desire to take the test, overriding the instructor's professional assessment of their readiness. While client satisfaction is important, it cannot supersede the fundamental requirement for safe driving. The instructor's expertise is to assess risk and competence, and this must be the primary driver of their recommendation regarding test readiness. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a systematic risk assessment framework. This involves 1. Hazard identification, recognizing potential dangers, e.g., hesitation at junctions. 2. Risk analysis, understanding the likelihood and severity of harm associated with the hazard, e.g., potential for collision due to misjudged gaps. 3. Risk evaluation, determining if the risk is acceptable or requires mitigation. 4. Risk treatment, implementing strategies to reduce or eliminate the risk, e.g., targeted training on judging gaps. 5. Monitoring and review, continuously assessing the effectiveness of the treatment and the learner's progress. In this context, the instructor must prioritize the learner's ability to make safe, independent decisions over their immediate desire to take the test. Question 7. Performance analysis shows that during a Brighton and Hove driving test, a driver encounters an unexpected road closure with a clear diversion sign. What is the most appropriate course of action for the driver to take? Option A. Stop the vehicle and wait for the examiner to notice the road closure and instruct the driver. Option B. Attempt to find an alternative route around the closure that is not indicated by the diversion sign without consulting the examiner. Option C. Immediately inform the examiner of the road closure and the diversion sign and ask for guidance on how to proceed. Option D. Proceed with the diversion without informing the examiner, assuming it is the correct action. The correct answer is C. Immediately inform the examiner of the road closure and the diversion sign, and ask for guidance on how to proceed. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the driver to balance immediate safety concerns with the potential for minor, non-hazardous infractions. The driver must exercise sound judgment to determine if a deviation from the prescribed route is necessary and justifiable, without compromising the integrity of the test or creating undue risk. The examiner's role is to assess the driver's ability to make these decisions safely and in accordance with the highway code. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves the driver immediately and clearly communicating their intention to deviate from the route to the examiner, explaining the reason for the deviation, e.g., an unforeseen obstruction, and seeking the examiner's confirmation. This demonstrates proactive communication, adherence to safety protocols, and respect for the testing process. The Highway Code, specifically sections concerning driver responsibility and communication with other road users, including examiners, implicitly supports this approach by emphasizing clear and safe conduct. This method ensures the examiner is aware of the situation and can assess the driver's decision-making in real time, while also ensuring the deviation is managed safely and appropriately. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to simply make the deviation without informing the examiner. This fails to demonstrate effective communication, a key skill assessed during the driving test. It could be interpreted as an attempt to circumvent the test route or a lack of awareness of the examiner's role. Ethically, it undermines the transparency of the assessment. Another incorrect approach is to stop the vehicle and wait for the examiner to ask about the obstruction. This shows a lack of initiative and proactive decision-making. While not directly unsafe, it misses an opportunity to demonstrate the driver's ability to manage unexpected situations independently and communicate effectively under pressure, which is a core component of safe driving. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to attempt to navigate around the obstruction in a way that is not clearly communicated or that creates a potential hazard, even if the intention is to rejoin the route. This could involve making sudden maneuvers or entering a situation where the driver's intentions are unclear to other road users or the examiner, thereby failing to uphold the principles of safe and considerate driving as outlined in the Highway Code. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes clear communication, safety, and adherence to established rules. When faced with unexpected situations during a test, the driver should first assess the immediate safety implications. If safe to do so, they should then communicate their observation and proposed action to the examiner, seeking their input or confirmation. This approach ensures transparency, allows for collaborative decision-making where appropriate, and demonstrates the driver's competence in managing real-world driving challenges. Question 8. Operational review demonstrates that a candidate scheduled for their Brighton and Hove driving test is visibly distressed and admits to feeling unwell, stating they are not feeling 100%. As the supervising instructor, what is the most appropriate course of action to uphold professional standards and ensure public safety? Option A. Politely explain that the test cannot proceed under these circumstances and offer to reschedule, emphasizing the need for the candidate to be in a calm and focused state to demonstrate safe driving. Option B. Offer to provide extra verbal guidance during the test to help them manage their distress and complete the assessment. Option C. Proceed with the test as planned, encouraging the candidate to do their best despite their current condition. Option D. Advise the candidate to push through it and try their best, as the test is important. The correct answer is A. Politely explain that the test cannot proceed under these circumstances and offer to reschedule, emphasizing the need for the candidate to be in a calm and focused state to demonstrate safe driving. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Brighton and Hove driver instructor because it involves balancing the immediate need to complete a driving test with the paramount responsibility of ensuring public safety and adhering to the strict standards set by the Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency, DVSA, for the UK. The instructor must make a judgment call under pressure, considering the candidate's current state and the potential risks involved, without compromising the integrity of the test or the safety of other road users in Brighton and Hove. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves prioritizing safety and regulatory compliance above all else. This means recognizing that a candidate exhibiting signs of significant distress or impairment, even if they claim to be ready, poses an unacceptable risk. The instructor should politely but firmly explain that the test cannot proceed under these circumstances, citing the need for the candidate to be in a calm and focused state to demonstrate safe driving. This aligns with the DVSA core mandate to ensure that all drivers licensed in the UK are competent and safe. Ethically, the instructor has a duty of care to the candidate, other road users, and themselves. Proceeding with a test where the candidate is demonstrably not in a fit state would be a breach of this duty and a failure to uphold professional standards. The instructor should offer to reschedule the test, demonstrating a commitment to the candidate's success when they are properly prepared. Incorrect approaches analysis. Proceeding with the test as planned, despite the candidate's visible distress and admission of feeling unwell, is professionally unacceptable. This approach disregards the fundamental requirement for a candidate to be in a fit and proper state to drive safely, potentially endangering the candidate, the examiner, and the public in Brighton and Hove. It prioritizes the completion of the test over safety and regulatory compliance, which is a direct contravention of DVSA guidelines. Suggesting the candidate push through it or try their best is also professionally unsound. This dismisses the candidate's genuine feelings and the potential impact on their driving ability. It implies that the test can be passed even when the candidate is not at their best, which undermines the purpose of the driving test as a measure of safe driving competence. This approach fails to acknowledge the ethical responsibility to ensure the candidate can demonstrate safe driving skills without undue influence from distress or illness. Offering to help them through by providing excessive verbal guidance or making allowances during the test is equally problematic. While instructors aim to support their students, the driving test is designed to assess independent, safe driving. Providing undue assistance compromises the integrity of the test and misrepresents the candidate's actual driving ability. It also sets a dangerous precedent and fails to equip the candidate with the skills to drive independently and safely on the roads of Brighton and Hove. Professional reasoning. When faced with a situation where a candidate's fitness to drive is in question, a professional driver instructor in Brighton and Hove should follow a clear decision-making process. First, assess the observable signs and the candidate's own statements regarding their condition. Second, consult the relevant DVSA guidelines and professional codes of conduct, which unequivocally prioritize safety and competence. Third, communicate clearly and empathetically with the candidate, explaining the rationale for any decision based on these guidelines. Fourth, offer practical solutions, such as rescheduling the test, to support the candidate's eventual success while upholding professional standards. The ultimate goal is to ensure that only safe and competent drivers are licensed. Question 9. Investigation of a scenario during a driving test in Brighton and Hove. A driver approaches a junction where a pedestrian is standing very close to the curb on the pavement, looking towards the road but not directly at the approaching vehicle. The driver intends to turn left at the junction. What is the most appropriate immediate action for the driver to take? Option A. Proceed with the left turn at the current speed, expecting the pedestrian to wait. Option B. Slow down significantly and prepare to stop, while also signaling the left turn. Option C. Maintain current speed and assume the pedestrian will move out of the way. Option D. Brake sharply and abruptly to a complete stop before the junction. The correct answer is B. Slow down significantly and prepare to stop, while also signaling the left turn. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the driver to balance immediate safety concerns with the need to adhere to traffic laws and the specific requirements of the Brighton and Hove driving test. The driver must make a rapid risk assessment under pressure, considering potential hazards, the examiner's expectation, and the consequences of their actions. The core challenge lies in interpreting the situation and choosing the safest, most legally compliant, and test-appropriate response. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves a comprehensive risk assessment that prioritizes safety while demonstrating an understanding of road rules and test objectives. This means identifying the immediate hazard, the pedestrian, assessing the risk they pose to themselves and others, and taking appropriate action to mitigate that risk. In this case, the driver should slow down and be prepared to stop if necessary, while also signaling their intention to turn. This approach demonstrates proactive hazard perception, adherence to the highway code, specifically rules regarding pedestrians and signaling, and the ability to manage the vehicle safely in a dynamic environment, all of which are critical for passing the Brighton and Hove driving test. The examiner is looking for a driver who can anticipate potential dangers and react responsibly. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to maintain speed and assume the pedestrian will move. This fails to conduct a proper risk assessment. It disregards the potential for the pedestrian to step out unexpectedly, creating a serious hazard and violating the principle of driving defensively. Ethically and regulatorily, this shows a lack of care for the safety of vulnerable road users and a disregard for the highway code's emphasis on caution around pedestrians. Another incorrect approach is to brake sharply and abruptly without considering the traffic behind. While braking is a necessary action, an uncontrolled, sudden stop can create a new hazard for following vehicles, potentially leading to a rear-end collision. This demonstrates poor anticipation of other road users and a failure to manage the vehicle smoothly and safely, which are key assessment criteria. It prioritizes one aspect of safety, avoiding the pedestrian at the expense of another, preventing a collision from behind. A third incorrect approach is to proceed with the turn without slowing down, assuming the pedestrian will yield. This is a dangerous assumption. It shows a lack of hazard perception and an unwillingness to adapt driving behavior to unexpected situations. It also demonstrates a failure to signal intentions clearly and in good time, which is a fundamental requirement of safe driving and a common reason for test failure. This approach prioritizes completing the maneuver over ensuring the safety of all road users. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a systematic risk assessment process. This involves 1. Hazard identification, recognizing potential dangers pedestrian near the road. 2. Risk assessment, evaluating the likelihood and severity of harm pedestrian could step out. 3. Decision-making, choosing the safest and most appropriate course of action based on regulations and test objectives. 4. Action, implementing the chosen action smoothly and safely. 5. Review, continuously monitoring the situation for changes. In this scenario, the driver must prioritize the immediate safety of the pedestrian and themselves, followed by ensuring the safety of other road users and demonstrating competent driving skills as per the Brighton and Hove driving test standards. Question 10. Comparative studies suggest that the effectiveness of risk assessment in driving instruction can be significantly influenced by the methodology employed. For a learner driver in Brighton and Hove preparing for their DVSA practical test, which of the following methods for quantifying the risk associated with their performance during a mock test would be most aligned with DVSA guidelines for comprehensive risk evaluation and professional practice? Option A. Focusing exclusively on the number of serious and dangerous faults, disregarding any minor faults observed during the assessment. Option B. Calculating a weighted average of the risk scores for each observed driving fault, using the DVSA fault severity grading, e.g., minor, serious, dangerous, to assign numerical values to each fault type and then summing these weighted scores. Option C. Simply counting the total number of minor driving faults observed during the mock test, irrespective of their specific nature or the context in which they occurred. Option D. Subjectively estimating the overall risk level based on the instructor's general impression of the learner's driving ability and confidence. The correct answer is B. Calculating a weighted average of the risk scores for each observed driving fault using the DVSA fault severity grading, e.g., minor, serious, dangerous, to assign numerical values to each fault type and then summing these weighted scores. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a driving instructor in Brighton and Hove by requiring them to quantify the risk associated with a learner driver's performance during a mock test. The challenge lies in translating subjective observations of driving behavior into objective risk metrics, which is crucial for providing constructive feedback and ensuring the learner's readiness for the official DVSA test. Accurate risk assessment is vital for both the learner's safety and the instructor's professional responsibility to uphold DVSA standards. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves calculating the weighted average of the risk scores for each observed driving fault, taking into account the severity of each fault as defined by the DVSA fault grading system. This approach directly quantifies the overall risk by assigning a numerical value to each error and aggregating them. For example, a serious fault worth 3 points would contribute more to the overall risk score than a minor fault worth 1 point. This method aligns with the DVSA emphasis on identifying and mitigating risks, providing a clear, data-driven basis for determining if the learner is safe to proceed to the practical test. The formula for this approach would be total risk score equals / sum I equals 1n / text fault severity score I / times / text number of faults I / where /n/ is the number of fault categories. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to simply count the total number of minor faults observed without considering their severity or the context in which they occurred. This fails to acknowledge that some faults, even if minor, can indicate a higher underlying risk or a pattern of unsafe behavior. For instance, repeatedly stalling at junctions, while technically minor, suggests a lack of confidence and control that could escalate into a more dangerous situation. This method lacks the nuance required by DVSA standards for comprehensive risk evaluation. Another incorrect approach is to subjectively estimate the overall risk based on a general feeling about the learner's performance, without any quantitative measurement. This is highly prone to bias and inconsistency. Professional driving instruction, especially in preparation for a regulated test, requires objective assessment. Relying on intuition alone does not provide a defensible or repeatable measure of risk and fails to meet the DVSA requirement for evidence-based feedback. A further incorrect approach is to focus solely on the number of serious or dangerous faults, ignoring the accumulation of minor faults. While serious and dangerous faults are critical, a high number of minor faults can collectively indicate a significant risk. For example, a learner with one serious fault but numerous minor faults related to observation and control may still pose a greater overall risk than a learner with one serious fault and no minor faults. This approach neglects the cumulative impact of less severe errors on overall road safety. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a systematic, data-driven approach to risk assessment. This involves understanding the DVSA fault grading system and its implications for risk. When evaluating a learner's performance, instructors should 1. Identify all faults observed. 2. Assign the appropriate DVSA severity score to each fault. 3. Calculate the weighted risk score for each fault type. 4. Sum these weighted scores to arrive at a total risk assessment. 5. Compare this total risk score against established benchmarks or thresholds for test readiness, considering the learner's overall progress and confidence. This structured method ensures objectivity, consistency, and adherence to regulatory standards. Question 11. The investigation demonstrates that a driver in Brighton and Hove is approaching a section of road known for its winding nature and potential for sudden changes in visibility due to parked vehicles. Considering the principles of risk assessment, which of the following actions best reflects a proactive and safe driving approach? Option A. Continuously scanning the road ahead, anticipating potential hazards like oncoming traffic or pedestrians emerging from between parked cars, and adjusting speed accordingly to maintain a safe margin. Option B. Focusing primarily on navigating the curves efficiently, with minimal attention paid to the spaces between parked vehicles. Option C. Maintaining a consistent speed limit, assuming that other road users will behave predictably and that visibility will remain adequate. Option D. Engaging in a conversation with a passenger while intermittently glancing at the road to ensure the vehicle remains within its lane. The correct answer is A. Continuously scanning the road ahead, anticipating potential hazards like oncoming traffic or pedestrians emerging from between parked cars, and adjusting speed accordingly to maintain a safe margin. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a driver in Brighton and Hove due to the inherent unpredictability of road conditions and the potential for unforeseen events. Driver must balance adherence to the law with the need for safe and responsible decision-making in real time. The challenge lies in accurately assessing risk and making appropriate adjustments to driving behavior without compromising safety or causing undue disruption. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a proactive and adaptive approach to risk assessment. This means continuously monitoring the driving environment, anticipating potential hazards, and making necessary adjustments to speed, position, and awareness. For a driver in Brighton and Hove, this would involve observing weather conditions, traffic flow, pedestrian activity, and the behavior of other road users. If conditions deteriorate or a potential hazard is identified, the driver should reduce speed, increase following distance, and be prepared to stop. This aligns with the fundamental principle of driving to arrive safely, which is implicitly supported by the Highway Code's emphasis on hazard perception and defensive driving techniques, even though specific regulations for this exact scenario are not detailed in the prompt. The ethical imperative is to prioritize the safety of oneself and others on the road. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to maintain a constant, predetermined speed regardless of changing conditions. This fails to acknowledge the dynamic nature of road safety and ignores potential hazards that may arise, such as sudden braking by other vehicles or unexpected obstacles. This demonstrates a lack of proactive risk assessment and a disregard for the principle of adapting driving to suit the circumstances, which is a cornerstone of safe driving practices. Another incorrect approach is to react solely to immediate threats without considering the broader context. For example, only braking sharply when a hazard is directly in front, rather than anticipating it. This reactive behavior increases the likelihood of skidding or being involved in a collision, as it leaves insufficient time and space for effective maneuver. It signifies a failure to engage in the continuous risk assessment required for safe driving. A further incorrect approach is to become overly distracted by external factors, such as passengers or personal devices, to the detriment of observing the road. This significantly impairs the driver's ability to perceive and assess risks, leading to a dangerous lapse in attention. The primary responsibility of a driver is to operate the vehicle safely, and any distraction that compromises this duty is professionally unacceptable and ethically irresponsible. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a systematic risk assessment process that involves 1. Hazard identification, actively scanning the environment for potential dangers. 2. Risk evaluation, assessing the likelihood and severity of identified hazards. 3. Risk control, implementing measures to mitigate or eliminate risks, e.g., adjusting speed, increasing distance. 4. Monitoring and review, continuously re-evaluating the situation and adjusting control measures as needed. This iterative process ensures that driving decisions are informed, proportionate, and prioritized towards safety. Question 12. Assessment of a learner driver's performance during a mock driving test on the busy A259 in Brighton. A driving instructor observes the learner consistently misjudging gaps in traffic when attempting to merge from a side road. This behavior is creating hazardous situations for oncoming vehicles and pedestrians. What is the most appropriate course of action for the driving instructor to take to uphold safety standards in Brighton and Hove? Option A. Continue the mock test without comment, making a note to cover this topic extensively in future lessons, but not intervening during the current assessment. Option B. Intervene by shouting instructions or making sudden, sharp movements with the steering wheel to correct the learner's actions, even if it causes a minor disturbance to other road users. Option C. Allow the learner to continue the mock test, hoping they will naturally improve their judgment as the test progresses, to avoid disrupting their confidence. Option D. Immediately and safely stop the vehicle, explain the observed risks to the learner, and provide corrective instruction, potentially ending the mock test early if safety remains compromised. The correct answer is D. Immediately and safely stop the vehicle, explain the observed risks to the learner, and provide corrective instruction, potentially ending the mock test early if safety remains compromised. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the driving instructor to balance the immediate safety of the public with the learner driver's immediate goal of passing the test. The instructor must make a judgment call under pressure, considering the potential consequences of both allowing the learner to continue and intervening. The specific context of Brighton and Hove, with its unique road conditions and traffic patterns, adds a layer of complexity that requires localized knowledge and a nuanced understanding of risk. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves prioritizing public safety above all else. This means recognizing that a learner driver's immediate desire to pass the test is secondary to the potential for causing an accident or endangering other road users. The instructor must intervene decisively and safely to prevent a dangerous situation from escalating. This approach aligns with the fundamental ethical duty of care owed by driving instructors to their students and the general public, as well as the regulatory requirements of the Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency, DVSA, in the UK, which mandates that instructors ensure their students drive safely and responsibly. The instructor's primary responsibility is to prevent harm. Incorrect approaches analysis. Allowing the learner to continue driving in a manner that poses a significant risk to others, even if it might lead to passing the test, is a severe ethical and regulatory failure. This demonstrates a disregard for public safety and a potential breach of the instructor's duty of care. It prioritizes the student's immediate objective over the well-being of the community. Intervening in a way that is abrupt or causes a secondary hazard, such as swerving or braking suddenly without due consideration for surrounding traffic, is also professionally unacceptable. While intervention is necessary, it must be executed with the same level of safety consciousness as normal driving. This approach fails to manage the risk of intervention itself. Hesitating to intervene due to a desire to avoid disrupting the test or causing the learner distress, and hoping the situation resolves itself, is a passive and dangerous approach. This inaction allows a potentially hazardous situation to persist, increasing the likelihood of an accident. It represents a failure to proactively manage risk and fulfill the instructor's duty to ensure safe driving. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this situation should employ a risk-based decision-making framework. This involves 1. Rapidly assessing the severity and imminence of the risk posed by the learner's driving. 2. Identifying potential intervention strategies and their associated risks. 3. Selecting the intervention that most effectively mitigates the primary risk while minimizing secondary risks. 4. Communicating clearly and calmly with the learner during and after the intervention. The overriding principle is always to err on the side of caution when public safety is at stake. Question 13. Compliance review shows a Brighton and Hove driving instructor is evaluating a learner's risk assessment capabilities during a mock hazard scenario involving a cyclist emerging from a blind driveway. The instructor needs to determine if the learner can effectively identify, assess, and respond to this potential danger. Which method best allows the instructor to gauge the learner's actual risk perception and decision-making process in this situation? Option A. Immediately taking control of the vehicle to prevent a potential collision, then explaining the danger to the learner. Option B. Asking the learner to describe their perception of the cyclist's actions and potential risks after the scenario has concluded. Option C. Observing the learner's physical reactions, such as braking or steering adjustments, without asking for their thoughts. Option D. Prompting the learner to verbalize their observations and concerns about the cyclist's potential action, and then assessing their reasoning. The correct answer is D. Prompting the learner to verbalize their observations and concerns about the cyclist's potential actions, and then assessing their reasoning. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Brighton and Hove driver instructor regarding the assessment of a learner driver's risk perception. The instructor must balance the need to evaluate the learner's ability to identify and mitigate hazards with the ethical obligation to ensure the safety of the learner, the examiner, and the public. A failure to accurately assess risk perception can lead to a false sense of security for the learner or an unnecessarily harsh assessment, both of which are detrimental to the learning process and public safety on Brighton and Hove's roads. Correct approach analysis. The best approach involves the instructor actively prompting the learner to articulate their thought process and observations during a simulated hazard scenario. This means asking open-ended questions like, "What do you see happening there?" or "What are your concerns about that situation?" and then observing the learner's verbal and nonverbal responses. This method directly assesses the learner's ability to identify potential risks, evaluate their severity, and consider appropriate actions, aligning with the core principles of risk assessment in driver training, as outlined by the Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency (DVSA) guidelines for the Brighton and Hove area. It allows for a nuanced understanding of the learner's cognitive processes in real time. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to simply observe the learner's actions without seeking verbal confirmation of their risk assessment. This fails to provide insight into the learner's internal thought processes and may lead to misinterpretations of their intentions or awareness. The learner might be reacting instinctively rather than through a conscious risk assessment, which is a critical skill to develop. Another incorrect approach is to immediately intervene and correct the learner's perceived error without allowing them to explain their reasoning. This bypasses the opportunity to understand their risk assessment capabilities and can stifle their confidence and independent decision-making. It assumes the instructor's perception of risk is the only valid one, neglecting the learning aspect of developing independent judgment. A further incorrect approach is to rely solely on the learner's self-reporting after the event without any real-time observation or prompting. While self-reflection is valuable, it is not a direct measure of in-the-moment risk assessment. The learner might reconstruct their thought process inaccurately or omit crucial details when recalling the event later, making it less reliable for assessing their immediate hazard perception skills. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured approach to risk assessment evaluation. This involves setting up realistic scenarios, observing the learner's behavior, and actively engaging them in a dialogue about their perceptions and decisions. The goal is to understand the learner's cognitive process, not just their actions. This iterative process of observation, questioning, and feedback allows for accurate assessment and targeted instruction, ensuring the learner develops robust risk management skills, essential for safe driving in Brighton and Hove. Question 14. Regulatory review indicates that Brighton and Hove taxi drivers are expected to conduct thorough risk assessments, considering a sudden severe hailstorm that significantly reduces visibility and makes road surfaces treacherous. Which approach best demonstrates responsible risk management and adherence to licensing standards? Option A. Assess the current visibility and road conditions. Communicate the safety concerns to the passenger. And if the risk is deemed unacceptable, discuss alternative solutions while prioritizing passenger safety. Option B. Continue the journey at a reduced speed, assuming the passenger's need to reach their destination outweighs the potential risks. Option C. Proceed with the journey as normal, trusting in the vehicle's capabilities and the passenger's understanding. Option D. Immediately refuse the fare, citing the weather as an absolute impediment without further assessment. The correct answer is A. Assess the current visibility and road conditions, communicate the safety concerns to the passenger, and if the risk is deemed unacceptable, discuss alternative solutions while prioritizing passenger safety. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Brighton and Hove taxi driver regarding risk assessment. The driver must balance the immediate need to complete a fare with the overarching responsibility to ensure the safety of passengers and other road users. The challenge lies in accurately assessing the risk posed by the weather conditions and making a judgment call that prioritizes safety without unnecessarily inconveniencing the customer or contravening licensing regulations. The driver's decision-making process must be informed by a proactive understanding of potential hazards and their mitigation. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a thorough, real-time assessment of the prevailing weather conditions and their potential impact on driving safety. This includes considering visibility, road surface grip, and the vehicle's ability to navigate safely. If the assessment indicates that continuing the journey poses an unacceptable risk to passengers or the public, the driver should communicate this clearly and professionally to the passenger, explaining the safety concerns and offering alternative solutions, such as waiting for conditions to improve or arranging for a different mode of transport if feasible and safe. This approach aligns with the Brighton and Hove City Council's licensing objectives, which prioritize public safety and the welfare of passengers. It demonstrates responsible risk management, adhering to the duty of care expected of a licensed taxi driver. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves prioritizing the completion of the fare above all else, regardless of the weather's severity. This fails to acknowledge the driver's primary duty of care to ensure passenger safety. It could lead to an accident, resulting in injury, damage, and potential disciplinary action from the licensing authority. This approach demonstrates a disregard for the inherent risks associated with adverse weather and a failure to conduct a proper risk assessment. Another incorrect approach is to immediately refuse the fare without adequately assessing the actual risk. While safety is paramount, an immediate refusal without considering the specific conditions or potential for safe navigation might be an overreaction. A more nuanced approach, involving a brief assessment and communication with the passenger, is generally preferred. This approach could lead to customer dissatisfaction and potentially a complaint to the licensing authority for unreasonable refusal of service if the conditions did not objectively warrant it. A third incorrect approach is to continue the journey without any adjustment to driving style or speed, despite recognizing the increased risks posed by the weather. This demonstrates a lack of proactive risk mitigation and a failure to adapt driving behavior to hazardous conditions. It directly contravenes the principles of safe driving and the expectation that drivers will adjust their approach to ensure safety in challenging circumstances. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this situation should employ a structured risk assessment framework. This begins with identifying the hazard, adverse weather. Next, they should evaluate the risk by considering the severity of the hazard and the likelihood of harm occurring. Based on this evaluation, they should implement control measures, which in this context might involve adjusting speed, increasing following distance, or, if the risk is deemed too high, communicating the safety concerns and exploring alternatives with the passenger. The decision-making process should always prioritize safety, followed by professional communication and adherence to licensing regulations. Question 15. Consider a scenario where, while driving on a busy section of the A23 in Brighton, you observe a group of children playing near the pavement. One child appears to be momentarily distracted by a ball rolling towards the road. What is the most appropriate risk assessment approach to ensure safety? Option A. Brake sharply and abruptly to a complete stop, regardless of traffic behind you. Option B. Immediately reduce speed. Scan for potential hazards beyond the immediate group of children, and prepare to stop if the ball or a child enters the roadway. Option C. Continue at the current speed, assuming the children are aware of their surroundings and will not enter the road. Option D. Sound your horn repeatedly to alert the children and their guardians to the potential danger. The correct answer is B. Immediately reduce speed, scan for potential hazards beyond the immediate group of children, and prepare to stop if the ball or a child enters the roadway. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Brighton and Hove driver because it requires immediate risk assessment and decision-making under pressure, balancing the safety of the public with the efficient flow of traffic. The driver must consider potential hazards that are not immediately obvious and make a judgment call that could have significant consequences. The specific context of Brighton and Hove, with its unique road layouts and potential for varied traffic conditions, adds a layer of complexity. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a comprehensive assessment of all available information, including visual cues, road conditions, and the behavior of other road users, to anticipate potential hazards. This approach prioritizes safety by proactively identifying and mitigating risks before they escalate. In the context of the Brighton and Hove Highway Code, this aligns with the overarching principle of driving defensively and maintaining awareness of the surroundings to prevent accidents. This involves looking far ahead, scanning mirrors, and being prepared to react to unexpected events, such as a child chasing a ball into the road or a vehicle suddenly braking. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to proceed without fully assessing the situation, assuming that the current conditions are safe. This fails to acknowledge the dynamic nature of driving and the potential for sudden, unforeseen hazards. It disregards the fundamental principle of defensive driving, which is to anticipate and prepare for the worst-case scenario, and could lead to a violation of road safety regulations in Brighton and Hove by failing to exercise due care and attention. Another incorrect approach is to overreact to minor perceived risks, leading to abrupt or unnecessary maneuvers. While caution is important, excessive hesitation or sudden braking without a clear and present danger can create new hazards for following vehicles and disrupt traffic flow, potentially contravening regulations regarding smooth and predictable driving. A third incorrect approach is to rely solely on the behavior of other drivers to dictate one's own actions without independent assessment. While observing others is part of risk assessment, it should not replace a driver's own critical evaluation of the road and potential dangers. This can lead to a cascade of poor decisions if other drivers are themselves exhibiting risky behavior. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a systematic risk assessment process. This involves 1. Observation, actively scanning the environment for potential hazards. 2. Identification, recognizing specific risks, e.g., pedestrian behavior, vehicle movements, road conditions. 3. Evaluation, assessing the likelihood and severity of each identified risk. 4. Mitigation, taking appropriate action to reduce or eliminate the risk. 5. Review, continuously reassessing the situation as it evolves. This structured approach ensures that decisions are informed, proportionate, and aligned with safety regulations and ethical responsibilities. Question 16. Upon reviewing the traffic situation in Brighton and Hove during a driving test, you observe an ambulance approaching from behind with its siren and flashing blue lights activated. What is the most appropriate and legally compliant course of action to take? Option A. Maintain your current speed and direction, assuming the ambulance will find a way to pass. Option B. Accelerate to try and clear the junction ahead before the ambulance reaches it. Option C. Immediately pull over to the left side of the road without checking your mirrors or assessing the immediate traffic conditions. Option D. Slow down significantly, observe the ambulance's position and speed, and prepare to pull over to the left and stop when it is safe to do so, ensuring you do not obstruct its path. The correct answer is D. Slow down significantly, observe the ambulance's position and speed, and prepare to pull over to the left and stop when it is safe to do so, ensuring you do not obstruct its path. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a driver in Brighton and Hove because it requires immediate judgment under pressure, balancing the need to proceed with the driving test against the potential for causing a hazard or contravening road traffic regulations. The examiner's role is to assess the candidate's ability to make safe and legal decisions, and the candidate's response directly reflects their understanding of these principles. The challenge lies in interpreting the situation accurately and acting decisively and appropriately, adhering to the highway code and local traffic management schemes within Brighton and Hove. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves the driver slowing down significantly, observing the situation carefully, and being prepared to stop if necessary to allow the emergency vehicle to pass safely. This aligns with the highway code, specifically Rule 219, which states that you should look and listen for emergency vehicles using their sirens and flashing lights, and if they are approaching from behind, pull over to the left and stop. Even if the emergency vehicle is not directly behind, the principle of yielding to emergency services takes precedence. This proactive and cautious approach prioritizes safety and compliance with traffic laws, demonstrating responsible driving behavior expected during a driving test in Brighton and Hove. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to continue at the current speed without significantly altering it, assuming the emergency vehicle will navigate around. This fails to acknowledge the urgency and priority of emergency vehicles, potentially creating a dangerous situation and contravening the spirit and letter of the highway code regarding yielding to emergency services. It demonstrates a lack of situational awareness and a disregard for the safety of others. Another incorrect approach is to immediately pull over to the side of the road without first assessing the immediate surroundings for safety. While yielding is correct, doing so without checking mirrors or ensuring it's safe to maneuver could lead to a different hazard, such as pulling into the path of another vehicle or obstructing traffic unnecessarily. This shows a lack of comprehensive risk assessment. A further incorrect approach is to accelerate to try and get ahead of the emergency vehicle. This is a dangerous and illegal maneuver that directly contravenes the highway code's emphasis on yielding to emergency vehicles. It shows a complete misunderstanding of road safety principles and a selfish disregard for the critical work of emergency services. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes safety, legality, and situational awareness. When faced with an emergency vehicle, the immediate step should be to identify the vehicle and its direction, assess the immediate environment for safe maneuvering options, and then act decisively to yield in a manner that is both safe and compliant with regulations. This involves a rapid but thorough risk assessment, considering the potential consequences of each action. Question 17. When evaluating the establishment of a new driving school in Brighton and Hove, which risk assessment approach best demonstrates adherence to the Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency's (DVSA) standards for learner safety and instructor responsibility? Option A. Relying on learners to possess an innate understanding of road risks and to self-manage any potential dangers during their lessons. Option B. Prioritizing the creation of attractive marketing materials and promotional offers to quickly build a client base, with a general understanding that driving inherently involves risks. Option C. Developing a detailed, localized risk assessment that identifies specific hazards in Brighton and Hove, outlines their potential impact, and proposes concrete mitigation strategies for vehicle, instructor, and learner management. Option D. Implementing a standardized, generic risk assessment template that can be applied to any driving school location without specific consideration for local conditions. Correct answer is C. Developing a detailed, localized risk assessment that identifies specific hazards in Brighton and Hove, outlines their potential impact, and proposes concrete mitigation strategies for vehicle, instructor, and learner management. Explanation. When evaluating the risk assessment for a new driving instructor setting up a school in Brighton and Hove, the professional challenge lies in balancing the need to attract new clients with the paramount duty of ensuring road safety and compliance with the Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency (DVSA) regulations. A new instructor must demonstrate a thorough understanding of potential hazards specific to the local environment and implement robust mitigation strategies, without overstating their capabilities or underestimating the complexities of teaching diverse learners. The best approach involves a comprehensive, proactive risk assessment that identifies potential hazards specific to the Brighton and Hove area, such as busy urban junctions, pedestrian zones, coastal roads with varying weather conditions, and specific traffic patterns. This assessment should detail the likelihood and severity of each identified risk, and crucially, outline clear, actionable control measures. These measures should include appropriate vehicle suitability checks, instructor training and continuous professional development, clear communication protocols with learners about risks, and contingency plans for adverse situations. This aligns with the DVSA emphasis on maintaining high standards of driver training and public safety, ensuring that all training is conducted in a manner that minimizes risk to the learner, the instructor, and other road users. An approach that focuses solely on marketing and client acquisition, without a detailed, documented risk assessment, is professionally unacceptable. This fails to meet the DVSA requirements for responsible operation and prioritizes commercial gain over safety, potentially exposing learners and the public to undue risk. Another unacceptable approach is to adopt a generic, one-size-fits-all risk assessment that does not consider the specific environmental and traffic conditions unique to Brighton and Hove. This demonstrates a lack of diligence and an inability to anticipate localized hazards, such as the specific challenges of navigating the A23 or the complexities of parking in the city center. Such an approach neglects the DVSA expectation that instructors will be familiar with and prepared for the driving environment in which they operate. Finally, an approach that relies on the assumption that learners will inherently understand and manage risks is also professionally flawed. The role of a driving instructor is to guide and educate learners on hazard perception and risk management. Delegating this responsibility without providing structured instruction and assessment is a failure of duty and contravenes the core principles of effective driver training. Professionals should adopt a systematic decision-making process that begins with understanding the regulatory landscape, DVSA guidelines, identifying specific contextual factors, Brighton and Hove's driving environment, conducting a thorough hazard identification and risk analysis, developing and implementing appropriate control measures, and regularly reviewing and updating the assessment. Question 18. The analysis reveals a new driver in Brighton and Hove is preparing for their practical driving test. Considering the DVSA emphasis on safe and competent driving across the UK, which practice strategy would best equip them for success while adhering to regulatory and ethical standards? Option A. Rely primarily on practice sessions with friends or family members who have a driving license, as they can offer more frequent opportunities to drive. Option B. Concentrate practice sessions on quiet residential streets and avoid busy roads or complex junctions until after the test is passed. Option C. Engage in regular practice sessions with an approved driving instructor, focusing on understanding and applying the highway code and general safe driving principles, while also gaining familiarity with common road types and traffic situations in Brighton and Hove. Option D. Dedicate practice time exclusively to memorizing the most common routes used by examiners in Brighton and Hove to ensure familiarity with every turn and junction. The correct answer is C. Engage in regular practice sessions with an approved driving instructor, focusing on understanding and applying the highway code and general safe driving principles, while also gaining familiarity with common road types and traffic situations in Brighton and Hove. Explanation. The analysis reveals a scenario where a driver, new to Brighton and Hove, is preparing for their driving test. The core challenge lies in balancing the need for familiarity with local road conditions and traffic patterns against the risk of developing ingrained habits that might deviate from the DVSA, Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency, testing standards. This requires a nuanced approach to practice, ensuring that learning is focused on safe and legal driving principles applicable across the UK, rather than solely on memorizing specific Brighton and Hove routes. The best approach involves a structured practice regime that prioritizes understanding and applying the highway code and general safe driving techniques, with a secondary focus on familiarizing oneself with common road layouts and traffic situations encountered in Brighton and Hove. This is correct because the DVSA driving test assesses a driver's ability to drive safely and competently in various conditions, adhering to UK-wide regulations. Practicing with a qualified approved driving instructor, ADDI, who understands DVSA standards, ensures that the driver is being coached on the correct techniques and is aware of common testing faults. Familiarity with local areas is beneficial for confidence and flow, but it should not supersede the fundamental principles of safe driving as outlined by the DVSA. This approach aligns with the ethical obligation to become a safe and responsible driver, not just someone who can pass a specific test in a particular location. An approach that solely focuses on memorizing specific test routes in Brighton and Hove is incorrect. This fails to address the broader requirement of the driving test, which is to demonstrate safe driving skills applicable anywhere in the UK. It also risks the driver becoming overly reliant on specific routes, potentially leading to confusion or unsafe maneuvers if the test deviates from the memorized path. Ethically, this approach prioritizes passing the test over developing genuine driving competence. Another incorrect approach is to practice extensively without a qualified ADI, relying solely on friends or family. While well-intentioned, these individuals may not be up to date with current DVSA testing standards or may inadvertently pass on incorrect driving habits. This can lead to the development of bad practices that are difficult to unlearn and can result in test failure. It also bypasses the structured learning and feedback essential for developing safe driving skills. Finally, an approach that neglects practice in varied traffic conditions and weather, focusing only on quiet residential streets, is also flawed. The driving test can take place in diverse conditions, and a driver must be prepared to demonstrate competence in busy traffic, at junctions, and in varying weather. Failing to practice these scenarios leaves the driver unprepared for the realities of driving and the demands of the test. Professionals should adopt a decision-making process that begins with understanding the core objectives of the driving test and the regulatory framework, DVSA guidelines and highway code. They should then assess the individual learner's needs and tailor a practice plan that builds foundational skills, incorporates varied scenarios, and includes expert feedback, ensuring that the learner is prepared for safe driving in any context, not just a specific test route. Question 19. Operational review demonstrates that a driver undergoing their Brighton and Hove driver's test approaches a junction where a cyclist is positioned on the pavement, appearing to be preparing to enter the road. What is the most appropriate and safest course of action for the driver to take? Option A. Accelerate to pass the cyclist quickly before they enter the main road. Option B. Continue at the current speed, assuming the cyclist will stop. Option C. Reduce speed or stop to allow the cyclist to pass safely before proceeding when clear. Option D. Brake sharply and erratically without checking mirrors or signaling. The correct answer is C. Reduce speed or stop to allow the cyclist to pass safely before proceeding when clear. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a driver to balance immediate safety concerns with adherence to established testing procedures. The presence of a potentially hazardous situation, the cyclist necessitates a rapid, yet controlled, decision that aligns with the principles of safe driving and the specific requirements of the Brighton and Hove driver's test. The challenge lies in accurately assessing the risk and responding appropriately without compromising the integrity of the test or endangering oneself or others. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a controlled, safe reaction that prioritizes the avoidance of a collision while demonstrating an understanding of the cyclist's potential movement. This means slowing down or stopping if necessary to allow the cyclist to pass safely, and then proceeding only when it is clear to do so. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the immediate hazard by reducing speed, thereby increasing reaction time and the margin for error. It aligns with the fundamental principles of defensive driving, which are implicitly assessed in the Brighton and Hove driver's test, emphasizing the need to anticipate and respond to potential dangers. Furthermore, it demonstrates the candidate's ability to manage the vehicle safely in a dynamic environment, a core competency evaluated by the examiner. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to accelerate to pass the cyclist quickly before they enter the main road. This is ethically and regulatorily unacceptable because it prioritizes completing the test maneuver over ensuring the safety of the cyclist and other road users. It demonstrates a failure to adequately assess the risk and a disregard for the potential consequences of a hasty maneuver, which could lead to a collision. This action would likely result in a serious driving fault or even a dangerous driving grading in the Brighton and Hove driver's test. Another incorrect approach is to brake sharply and erratically without checking mirrors or signaling. This is also professionally unacceptable, as it creates an unpredictable situation for following traffic and could lead to a rear-end collision. While it might avoid hitting the cyclist, the lack of controlled braking and situational awareness indicates a deficiency in hazard perception and vehicle control, which are critical elements of the driving test. Such a reaction suggests panic rather than a considered, safe response. A further incorrect approach is to ignore the cyclist and continue as if they were not present, assuming they will stop. This is fundamentally unsafe and ethically reprehensible. It demonstrates a severe lack of hazard perception and a failure to anticipate the actions of other road users. The Brighton and Hove driver's test explicitly assesses a driver's ability to observe and react to all potential hazards, and ignoring a cyclist on the road is a direct contravention of these requirements, posing a significant risk of accident. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a systematic approach to hazard management. This involves 1. Observation, actively scanning the environment for potential hazards. 2. Hazard identification, recognizing the cyclist as a potential hazard. 3. Risk assessment, evaluating the likelihood and severity of a potential collision. 4. Decision-making, choosing the safest course of action based on the risk assessment. 5. Action, executing the chosen maneuver safely and effectively, while maintaining awareness of other road users. In this scenario, the professional driver would recognize the cyclist as a hazard, assess the risk of them entering the road, and decide to reduce speed or stop to allow them to pass safely, demonstrating control and consideration for others. Question 20. Implementation of a new vehicle for a Brighton and Hove driving school requires a thorough financial assessment. If the new vehicle costs £20,000, has an estimated resale value of £8,000 after 5 years, and is expected to incur annual running costs, insurance, tax, fuel, maintenance of £3,500. How much must the driving school earn in total revenue over the 5 years to break even on the vehicle's acquisition and operation, assuming no other business expenses are considered for this specific calculation? Option A, £28,000. Option B, £35,500. Option C, £17,500. Option D, £20,000. The correct answer is B, £35,500. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Brighton and Hove driving instructor by requiring them to assess the financial viability of a new training vehicle while adhering to the specific regulatory requirements for driving instructors in the UK, as overseen by the Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency, DVSA. The instructor must balance business acumen with their duty of care to students and compliance with financial regulations, ensuring that operational decisions do not compromise the quality or safety of instruction. The core challenge lies in accurately forecasting costs and revenue to make an informed decision that is both financially sound and ethically responsible. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a comprehensive financial projection that accounts for all relevant costs and potential revenue streams over the expected lifespan of the vehicle. This includes not only the initial purchase price, but also ongoing expenses such as insurance, road tax, fuel, maintenance, and potential repairs. Crucially, it must also factor in the projected number of driving lessons the vehicle can facilitate and the instructor's hourly rate, considering potential downtime for servicing or unforeseen issues. This approach aligns with the DVSA guidance on professional conduct, which implicitly requires instructors to operate sustainably and avoid financial decisions that could negatively impact their ability to provide instruction or compromise student safety due to inadequate resources. A thorough calculation ensures the business remains viable and can meet its obligations. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to base the decision solely on the initial purchase price of the vehicle and a rough estimate of hourly earnings, ignoring all other operational costs. This fails to acknowledge the significant ongoing expenses associated with running a vehicle for commercial purposes, such as insurance premiums, which are considerably higher for driving school vehicles, and the cost of regular maintenance and potential repairs that are inevitable with high usage. This oversight could lead to a situation where the business is not profitable, potentially forcing the instructor to cut corners on essential maintenance or even cease operation, thereby failing their students and contravening the spirit of professional responsibility. Another incorrect approach would be to prioritize a vehicle with the lowest upfront cost without considering its reliability or suitability for driving instruction. While a lower initial outlay might seem attractive, a less reliable vehicle could lead to frequent breakdowns, resulting in canceled lessons, lost revenue, and student dissatisfaction. This also fails to consider the long-term cost of repairs and potential impact on the instructor's reputation. The DVSA expects instructors to provide a consistent and reliable service, which is undermined by such a decision. A third incorrect approach would be to overestimate the number of billable hours the vehicle can realistically achieve in a given period, perhaps by not accounting for student no-shows, cancellations, or the instructor's own availability. This optimistic projection, without a buffer for reality, can lead to a false sense of profitability. The financial projections must be grounded in realistic utilization rates, considering the practicalities of scheduling and student engagement, to avoid making a decision based on an unsustainable revenue model. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a systematic, data-driven approach to financial decision-making. This involves creating detailed financial models that incorporate all known costs and realistic revenue projections. When evaluating a significant capital expenditure like a new training vehicle, instructors should 1. Identify all direct and indirect costs associated with the asset over its expected useful life. 2. Estimate potential revenue based on realistic utilization rates and pricing. 3. Calculate key financial metrics such as break-even points and return on investment. 4. Conduct sensitivity analysis to understand how changes in key variables, e.g., fuel prices, number of students, might affect profitability. 5. Ensure the decision aligns with professional standards and regulatory expectations for service provision.